Let me introduce Tom, and I could give you all the different things that he's done, but I want to tell you about the man, Tom Bradford, this morning. I first met Tom Bradford when I was being interviewed for this job to come down from Richmond to YBL. So obviously I think Tom Bradford is a man of insight and good taste. Certainly he is a man of wisdom, and he believed in Ann and I enough to bring us down. He's a man that always will give you a straight answer. It's a well thought through answer. It's a conviction answer, but he will give you his wisdom as he gives you his answer. He's also a man that knows how to use his gifts. He and Mary Ann, particularly Mary Ann, has the gift of hospitality. And I could ask a show of hands of everybody that's been in the Bradford house, and probably, it would be most of the people in here probably. To tell you how committed they are to the gifts, they bought an extra oven in their house, they have a baking, warming oven, they have an extra freezer, just so they can host people in their house. And in many YBL studies of people after they completed it, we went to the Bradford's house and heard how God had really helped them. Obviously, he's involved in the community. He's loved his church. He loves his pastor. He loves his city. He was chairman of the United Way, and I remember asking Tom one time, I said, Tom, the United Way, I'm just not sure that I would be involved in that. And he instructed me and helped me understand. He said, number one, Birmingham United Way has structure that we've set up to really go to the right places. But then he also said, if Christians are not on these committees, who is going to be on these committees? And that really gave me a vision to talk to my generation about us being involved in the community more. And Billy Ice and I helped launch some key leaders where we said we were getting involved more in our community. And that's something that he has done for us. He has lived the Christian life faithfully, purposely, and influentially. He's taught me and all of us here how to live well, and now he's teaching us how to finish well. And so I want Tom Bradford to come up. He's a mentor, he's a supporter, he's an encourager, he's a friend. So Tom, come up and speak for us.
Thank you. This is amazing. When Phil called me several weeks ago and asked me to do this, I was expecting a crowd of 25 or 30 people. This is really amazing. As I came in today, it was interesting. Several people told me, Tom, you're looking good. And I realized that's just a nice way of saying, wow, you don't look near as bad as I thought you would. I think a lot of you know my friend Ricky Brooks. He was at a meeting in my office a few weeks ago, and he was telling us about going to pick up Wales Goebel for lunch one day. And Wales is 92 years old, and he said Wales came bouncing out of the house and across the yard and jumped in the car. And Ricky said, Wales, you're looking good. Wales said, Ricky, son, he's got this southern drawl, I've determined that there's only 3 stages of life. First stage is youth, second stage is middle age, the last stage is you're looking good. So I'm obviously in the last stage here, looking good, but I'm grateful to be here. Phil has asked me just to tell a few stories about my life, and I think for this crowd I'll start with how I happened to enter second half. I was a food broker for 49 and a half years, sold my business in 2007, intending to retire. Like my dad did, he retired when he was 62, but he drove into the office every day till he was 92. He just did volunteer work. And as you know, you can stay as busy as you want doing volunteer work, but you don't have any responsibilities. You're free to travel or go hunting or play golf or tennis or whatever you want to do. And I was kind of looking forward to doing that. I was 71 years old, thought it was time to do volunteer work, but some young guys came and I was transitioning the employees out of the building and said, we'd like for you to help us start a local Christian foundation as an affiliate office of the National Christian Foundation in Atlanta. He said, we've been trying for 4 or 5 years to get this going and couldn't get it off the ground. We finally got serious about it and had an all-day meeting with one of the vice presidents of the National Christian Foundation and said, what do we need to do? And he said, well, you need to do 2 things. First of all, you need to put together a steering committee that'll put up the seed money for the first couple of years so it can get some assets. Secondly, you need to recruit some older guys in the community to be on the board to add credibility so that the older people will feel comfortable putting their money here. And we've got Drayton Neighbors is going to be on the board. We'd like for you to be on the board. I said, well, I'm kind of busy right now, but let me give that some thought. Well, I guess a couple of months later, Ron Blue came to town and persuaded me to do that. And so I wrestled with the Lord for probably 6 weeks about it. I wanted to just do volunteer work, but the Lord just kept after me. And I happened to go to a conference put on by Scott Dawson in Pigeon Forge, a senior adult conference, 500 whiteheads up there for a long weekend. And the speaker was Tony Evans from Dallas. He said, you guys don't need to think about retiring. That's not in the Bible. You need to find God's purpose for your life. Well, this was in September, and I'd sold the business 1st of July, and I had a 6-month workout contract. So the end of December, I was through. Well, he had my attention. He said, sometimes it's hard to find God's purpose for your life, but if these 4 things ever come together at the same time, chances are it's God's purpose for you. And the first one is, what's your passion? What turns you on? What do you enjoy? Well, I thought, well, Christian work is my passion. I enjoyed business, but Christian work was my passion. Secondly, what are your gifts? What are you good at? And I'm thinking, well, I'm sort of an administrator or salesman. I'm not a visionary kind of guy. I'm more of a manager than a visionary. And said, thirdly, what experiences has God put in your path along the way to prepare you for this? And I'm thinking, well, I'm always raising money for something. I was head of the Capital Funds Drive at Briarwood and United Way, and I'm one of these funny guys that just enjoys raising money. Most people hate it, but I kind of like it. But anyhow, the fourth one was when the opportunity presents itself. And I kind of felt like God was tapping me on the shoulder and said, I'm presenting you with an opportunity here. You don't need to be on the board like they were asking me to do. Said, you need to run that thing. I just wanted to be on the board. I didn't want to run it. But like I say, I wrestled with the Lord for probably 4 or 6 weeks and finally gave in. Called Curtis Tanner, the guy that had asked me to do it, in and said, Curtis, where do y'all stand on getting this thing going? And he said, well, I've got a problem. I've got 9 guys say they'll put up all the seed money, but nobody will give me any money till they know who's going to run it. And I don't feel like I can hire somebody to run it until I've got some money. I said, well, let me tell you where I am. And I told him my story. I said, tell you what I'll do. If you want me to, I'll get the thing up and running in 60 days. I'll recruit the rest of the board, get it going. I'll give you 2 years of my life, Lord willing. And once I get it going good, I'll recruit and train your president. You've got $100,000 in the budget for the salary for the president. At my age and position, I'm no longer focused on how much I can accumulate. I'm more focused on how much I can give away. So you just put that in a giving fund for me to give away, and I'll be glad to do that. And he said, well, that's a deal. So that was in November of 2007. So I retired December 31st. On January 2nd, I started the National Christian Foundation of Alabama as an affiliate office of National Christian Foundation in Atlanta. We had 12 families that had funds with us, had about $15 million in assets. The Lord is really blessed. Now we've got over 900 families with funds, and we've got $110 million in assets, and we've been ranked by the Birmingham Business Journal as the largest charitable trust in Birmingham. So God has really blessed. That 2 years is stretched into 13 years. And I probably would still do it another 13 years if the doctor hadn't messed me up and told me I had cancer. So anyhow, that's where I am. That's been a great blessing to me. I guess the second story I'll tell you is about maybe 10 or 12 years ago, my nephew Carter Harsh, who's here today, asked me if I would come speak to his accountability group. They were in their mid-50s and I was in my mid-70s. Said, we'd just like to know what we need to be thinking about for the next 20 years. Well, obviously, I'd been lying awake at night thinking about that a lot, and never entered my mind. So I thought, I better think about that. And so I did give it some thought. And so this is what I told them. I said, you know, if you live long enough, there are 5 things you're going to have to give up that you probably don't want to give up. The first one is your job. And sometimes it's maybe a hobby if you're already retired, maybe golf or tennis or whatever, hunting or whatever it is. The second thing is your car. The third thing is your house. And the fourth thing is the right to make your own decisions. Now the question is, how are you going to make those decisions? Chances are, at the time when it comes, you won't be the best person to make that decision. You need a little bit of help on that. You'll be kicking against the pricks. And so what I've decided to do is I've recruited me 3 younger guys. I started getting my tennis group, which was Frank Barker and Crawford Nevins and Don Harrison. But they were all older than I was. I mean, so that was kind of stupid. So I got 3 younger guys. It was Tom Carradine and Bruce Stallings and Scott Dawson, all 25 years younger than I was, and guys that I respected and I loved, and I knew they loved me. And I said, would you be willing to hold me accountable in each of those areas so that if my kids feel like it's time for me to quit driving, they can come to you and tell you, you don't make my kids take the car away from me. Or if I've got to move out of my house, you know, then I don't want my kids to be the one to have to do that. So anyhow, they all reluctantly agreed. Nobody wanted to have to do that, but they agreed to do that. So that's what I have done, and I think it's a good plan to have. I'll tell you an interesting story. About probably 2 or 3 years after that, I was having lunch with one of those guys, Bruce Stallings, one day, and he said, Tom, you said a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, when you started the National Christian Foundation, you were going to give them 2 years. It's been 3 or 4 years. How much longer are you going to do this? I said, well, you know, that may be up to you to tell me when I've got to quit. And I said, but right now I feel like I'm able to keep up with everything. I'm physically strong. I'm mentally alert. I think I can keep up with all the things that have to be done there. And we talked about that a while. And we got in the car to drive back to Briarwood for me to drop him off. And I started talking about it again and talking about how I think I'm still mentally alert enough to keep up with all this stuff. But I realize if I live long enough, I will not be able to keep up with all this stuff. But right now, I think I'm pretty sharp. I can keep up with it. So we get back to the church, and I'd been grousing about the air conditioning on my car wasn't working. Right, it was a hot day in September, and I was riding with the windows down. And I said, I hate to take my car into the shop, worse than taking a beating, but I'm going to have to do this. And he started to get out of the car, and he's hot air blowing out, and he said, Tom, I don't think your air conditioning's turned on. I said, what? And I got the car with, you know, one of these things you just punch a screen. You know, I hate this stuff. But anyhow, I started, you know, punching screen. I didn't know what I was doing. All of a sudden, here comes the cold air. And Bruce looked at me and said, you want to call Tom and Scott, or do you want me to call them? Well, the third story I'll tell is about, I guess maybe 15 years ago, I was at a Walk Through the Bible conference, and Bruce Stallings, the teacher, was talking about the passage in Judges where Joshua had died, and it talked about all the days of Joshua, the Israelites followed the Lord as long as Joshua lived, and the elders who outlived Joshua. But then a new generation arose that did not know the great things the Lord had done for the Israelites, and they walked away from the Lord. And I got to thinking about that, and I thought, you know, I don't want my great-grandkids to not know what the Lord has done in my life. And so I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to write a book when I retire. Problem is, I didn't retire. and so I didn't have a chance to write that book. Then when COVID hit, I had to shut down my office in April of last year, work from home, and I got a little bit bored doing that, and I thought, well, I better, if I'm ever going to write that book, I better get around to it. And so I started writing a book, and I'm going to recommend that to y'all. It's just called The Bradford Family History. It's not written for anybody but my family. I can't imagine anybody else would even be interested in reading it, but I wanted my great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids to know what the Lord had done. And I did it in chapters. The first chapter is about the greatest decision I ever made, which is my testimony. And I came to Christ with Frank Barker, but basically through the 4 spiritual laws. So I put the 4 spiritual laws in the back of the book so that they would have it. Back when I came to Christ, everybody who was a Christian knew what the 4 spiritual laws were. The younger generation never heard of it. They don't even know. But I think it's a great way to explain the difference in believing about Christ and believing in Christ. So I wrote 14 chapters in the book so that you can read it one chapter at a time, and I've given it to my kids and grandkids and hope that they will pass it down to their kids and grandkids so that they will know what the Lord has done. And then the last story I'll tell, of course, is about what's going on now, which is what Phil asked me to come and talk about. A couple of months ago, my doctor found in just a routine MRI that I had a mass in my stomach right next to my liver, about the size of a baseball. And he said, that's got to come out. Did some tests on it and said it's benign, but it needs to come out. So I went in for surgery on April the 16th. And the doctor, when it was over, said when I got in there, it was too big and it was already in your liver and it was too close to a major artery. I couldn't take it out. So I just sewed you back up. We'll have to look at other ways to treat it. And so I wound up going back to my oncologist a week later, right after my 84th birthday, and found that they had taken another test while I was in surgery and it was malignant. So he said, if you do nothing, you've got 4 to 6 months to live. If you treat it aggressively, we can probably add a year to that. Well, that was kind of a shock to us. And so I know people, when they've heard about it, have asked me 3 questions. It's always the same 3 questions. First of all, how you doing? Secondly, how's Mary Ann doing? And then thirdly, what are your plans? So I'll try to answer those 3 questions for you. I'm doing great. I feel good. I was telling somebody this morning, if the doctor hadn't told me that I had cancer and messed up my summer, I'd still be just going like I was. I don't feel like there's anything wrong. Every now and then I have a slight pain, but it's not something that I'm even aware of most of the time. I'm working, going to the office every day. I play tennis Monday with Frank Barker, by the way. He's 89 and still playing tennis. Remarkable tennis player. He can't remember the score, but that makes it a lot easier for me. But anyway, Mary Ann's doing great. It's been amazing. She cried when we got home from the doctor for about 30 or 45 seconds and then bounced back to her normal, upbeat, bubbly personality. She's probably broken down and cried maybe 4 or 5 times in the last couple of months, usually for 30 seconds, and then boom, bounces right back. So we're doing great. What are your plans? I've told the doctor that I'm not the least bit interested in spending the last few months of my life sick, so I'm not going to take chemotherapy. I'm just going to ride it out and treat it as best he can without going through anything aggressive on that. So I did tell my doctor, and I informed the Lord that I would like to have just enough time to get Mary Ann settled into a smaller house. We live in a large house, and we'd been talking for a couple of years about needing to downsize that house, but we just put it off. As you know, you put things like that off. But this kind of brought that to a head, and so we decided we needed to start getting something small and looking for a garden home. My daughter Peggy's in the real estate business, and So she was looking around and taking Mary Ann to a few smaller homes. We couldn't find anything we liked. But about a week after we started doing that, Peggy called me on a Tuesday and said, "Dad, I found online that one of the cottages at Danbury is coming on the market Thursday morning." Now, Danbury is a retirement home right next door to Inverness, and they built a retirement center right across the street of 49 garden homes in a gated area, and they're all individually owned. And she said, "Would you like to go look at that?" I said, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea." So I had asked the Lord to give me a sign that if I was going to buy a house, Mary Ann would have to say, "I like this, this is what I want," because it's not for me, it's for her. And so we got an appointment to get the first looking at the house at 9:30 on Thursday morning of that week. We went in, we spent about 45 minutes in the house, and Mary Ann said, "I really like this, let's make an offer." Well, that was my sign. So we made an offer of what they were asking for the house, but we could see on MLS that 2 other people were coming in to see the house that day. So I figured, well, I'm going to get in a bidding war here. And I was trying to figure, what should I do? Well, they accepted our offer the next morning, so I had me a house. Now, my friend Tom Carradine had found that I was thinking about selling my house and moving, and he had called me and said, "Hey, my daughter and son-in-law are moving to Birmingham. He's a doctor, had been recruited at Grandview, and they're looking for a house in Mountain Brook. Would you be interested in selling your house to them?" I said, "Sure, I'd love to sell it to them, but I'm not putting it on the market until I buy a house." And he said, "Oh, I understand. But they're going to be in town this weekend for the Regions Golf Tournament and just like to stop by and see the house if they can." I said, "Sure, just tell them to come at 10 o'clock Saturday morning." And so he did. Well, we bought the house, like I say, on Friday. They showed up Saturday morning. I said, "Well, I've got news for you. We bought a house yesterday. So if you want it, this house is yours." Well, they went around and looked at the house, and for about 20 minutes, and we sat down in the living room, and I said, my daughter Peggy ran me a list of all the houses in Mountain Brook our size that have sold in the last 2 years, and they're ranked in descending order of sales price, and the lowest price was this, the highest price was this. Most of them are right here in the middle. That's what I want for my house. If you want it, it's yours. I would like to know by tomorrow afternoon, Sunday afternoon, because if you're not going to buy it, I'm going to list it with Peggy Monday morning. They looked at each other, didn't say a word, turned back to me and said, "We don't need to talk about it or think about it. We'll take it." So in less than 24 hours, I bought the perfect house. I sold my house without having to put it on the market. Now, only the Lord can do that. So praise the Lord. So we moved 2 weeks ago today. I hung my last picture Monday of this week, and so we're almost settled. We still got some other things that have to be done to the house, but God is so good. So that's my story. I appreciate your prayers that I can stay healthy to get her completely settled. I think that's going to take just a few more months to get that done. And I guess I'll just close with this comment. I read somewhere years ago, death leaves a heartache that no one can heal, but love leaves a memory that no one can steal. So my advice to you is spend whatever time you have left, and I don't know if I've got 10 minutes or 10 years, but neither do any of y'all know. Spend whatever time you have focused on love. You know, love the Lord, love your spouse, love your kids, love your friends, and create a memory that nobody can steal. Thank you.
He has agreed to take a few questions, so I'll ask him to come back up here. Tom, I'll ask the first one. Share how Reverend Barker shared the gospel with you.
Well, I had seen the 4 spiritual laws in the Sunday school class on Sunday, and it hit me for the first time that I believed intellectually everything about Christ. I knew who he was, that he had died for my sins were raised from the dead. I believed all that, but I'd never made a commitment to him. I just didn't understand that part. And so I decided that day that I was going to put Christ on the throne of my life and try to make every decision as though he was on the throne. And so Mary Ann felt the same way. And so I started doing that, but I didn't feel any different. I told Mary Ann, I said, maybe we better go to one of those Bible studies that our religious fanatic friends are going to. And so we were going to go to one Friday night, but she called me at work Thursday and said, hey, I just found out that Frank Barker is teaching a class at his house tonight. You want to go to that? I said, well, he's the guru of most of these fanatics. Why don't we go see what he's got to say? And so we went to his house that night, and he had about, I guess, 18 or 20 people there just sitting around his living room. And he opened the Bible and said, we'll pick up where we left off last week. And he did, and so it was fascinating. He'd read a verse and explain it, and read a verse and explain it. I'd never heard the Bible explained so clearly. And he said, well, but 9 o'clock, he said, we'll stop here and pick up next week. We always close by praying around the room. I thought, ooh, my goodness. I've never prayed out loud, a bunch of strangers here. So to make it worse, he said, and we always kneel. So we knelt down there, and he could see the blood drain from my face. He said, we keep it simple, just a sentence or two. And so we knelt down, and the first guy started praying. And he prayed for every missionary and everything I'd ever heard. And I didn't hear a word he said. All I'm doing is thinking about what I'm going to pray. And so it so happened that Mary Ann was the next one in line to pray. And my wife has got such a tender heart. She cannot pray out loud without getting choked up. She's just a very emotional person. And she got choked up and just said, Lord, help me to become a Christian. Well, I was so taken with the sincerity of that simple prayer, I forgot that brilliant prayer I had thought up, and all I could say is, Lord, help me to become a Christian. Well, needless to say, everybody else in the room prayed for us, which was fine. And we stood up to have refreshments, and Frank came up to me and said, can you stick around? I'd like to talk to you. And, of course, I wanted to talk to him, and so everybody cleared out pretty quick. They could see what was happening. And I told Frank where I was that I'd prayed every day that week for Christ to come in and take control of my life. I said, I don't feel any different. How do you know? He said, Tom, you don't have saving faith. Saving faith, according to the scriptures, is believing something that you can't see or feel or touch. It's the assurance of things unseen. And he said, if you asked Christ to come in and you heard a thud or a bell ring, that wouldn't take any faith. He said, Christ said, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come in to him. You don't think he'd lie to you? I said, oh, no. And he said, well, why don't you invite him one more time and then just thank him for doing what he promised to do? I said, well, that just seems so simple. He said, it is simple for the little children, for the simple-minded. That's how you come to Christ, as a little child. I thought, okay, and so I did, invited Christ to come in, thanked him for doing what he promised to do. Mary Ann did the same thing. Left his house that night. I still didn't feel any different, but I just knew for the first time that something had happened in my life. Got home at 10 o'clock and picked up the phone and called her brother, Fred, who was one of those fanatics who had been bugging us for over 2 years. And I said, Fred, you're not going to believe what happened tonight. Your sister and I trusted Christ. Well, he was so excited. The next day I told my dad, and then that night I told my brother John. So I just couldn't wait. I was so excited. But that's how I came to Christ. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
So what if you live past what the doctor said? What are you going to do then?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
If you live past what the doctor's expectations are, what are you going to do?
I'm going to keep doing exactly what I've been doing. I love what I do at the National Christian Foundation. I love helping people give away their money. So I've told the board that I would like to continue doing what I'm doing as long as the Lord gives me strength to drive into the office every day. Now, if it gets to the point where I'm not mentally alert enough to work the air conditioning on my car, then I will expect Tom Carradine, Bruce Stallings, and Scott Dawson to come to me and say, I think it's time for you to hang it up. So, I did. Okay.
top memory verses that you live by on your memory verses? We all have memory verses that we live by. What are some of yours?
Well, this is a crazy one. And mine is Galatians 6. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. A lot of people take that as a warning. I've always taken that as a promise. And so that's sort of my favorite. I just try to sow good seeds. My friend Sam Peoples, who's gone on to be with the Lord, said, you know, a lot of people go around sowing bad seeds and then they pray for crop failure.
Well, what a blessing. What a blessing. Thank you, Tom. And I'd forgotten how funny you are. Just a life well lived, and we're just so grateful that you were with us this morning, and certainly things to take back with us. Again, we'll have this on our website. Thank you, Haddon, for being here and taping it and videoing it. We'll get that up next week on our website, so people that couldn't be here, and there were many that wanted to be here, will be able to hear what Tom had to say. Again, I would ask you if you would do us the favor of filling out your card if you'd like any information, or just let us know, update your mailing list, email list, whatever, so we can let you know of future events. Very grateful that you're here, and for Hoover, Kia and his staff are making this happen. Tom, I want to ask you to come up one more time, and we have got a little memory for you. We don't have 14 chapters, but we put together, Roger Cartwright and our committee put together this for you. It says Tom Bradford, a true leader. It has some testimonies in here of your bio, and there's some testimonies from some of your favorite people in here, tennis buddies and different things. And then there's some section in the back that you can ask others to sign for you, and we will have copies later for your children so they can read that along with the book. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We do have Finish Well hats. We enjoy wearing mine. It's a good opportunity to share your faith if you're wearing a Finish Well hat. And we have those available, but rather than wear the hat, wear it in your heart. That would be the best thing. I'd like to close this morning from my grandmother's devotional that was written in 1916, and I was reading it this morning, and this prayer I want to pray that will end us here. Again, you can hang around and visit, but thank you for being here. So let's bow our heads. Dear Father, we commit ourselves with all we have and are into thy loving care. I would ask thee to bless us, keep us, guide us, forgive our sins, and finally take us to thyself with all the redeemed. We ask it in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen. You are dismissed.